really wanted to deeper into fashion from a culture perspective, from a political perspective, from an environmental perspective, but I didn't know how to like navigate that.
Told you my time is rest assured until I see me some checks and O's. Step on flows on the service clothes. These are things that
Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to another episode of Chop It Up with your girl, Lebana. In this podcast platform, which is heavily culturally based, we speak to individuals who inspire me and will also inspire you. We go through their life journeys through engaging conversations. And today we have with us a special guest, fashion stylista, as I call her, Nifemi Ashani herself. Nifemi, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me. Feel so blessed to be here.
And we're also so grateful to have you as well. So Nifemi is an Afro-diasporic researcher, stylist, producer, and podcast host, as well as entrepreneur. So we're going to get right into it. We're going to start with our section called Chop Choices. So I'm going to ask you kind of like a this or that. I'm going to ask you with this versus this, and you're going to tell me which one you prefer and why. And then I will also answer some of those as well. Okay. So the first one, vintage or modern fashion icons?
Vintage or modern fashion icon? I would say vintage. Yeah.
And
because I really like rare pieces, things that you can't really have access to in today. I feel like modern icons or modern style is very accessible and replicable, but very much a lot of vintage wear. And even people who, like during the 90s, for example, who were coming of age in the renaissance of fashion, they were very much like the creativity that was brewing through them, and you see designs was just something different. So I always appreciate vintage wear. Still admire modernists, but yeah, definitely vintage.
okay. I think for me, vintage, because if you look at modern, it taps into a lot of vintage. If you look at like is it Y2K and like that sort of fashion, it taps into maybe it's like brats or like people in that like era of like early 2000s. So
Yeah.
I feel like modern is great, but it also draws reference to vintage.
Exactly.
Okay, next up is fashion documentaries or fashion biographies.
Ooh. Fashion documentaries. The reason why I say that is because you can also get the biographies from the documentaries.
I
And I
agree.
feel as much as I love reading, I'm very big on reading, but at the same time with fashion documentaries, you get to see the visuals from what you have read, right? So it's really interesting to follow the visuals of someone's like biography, right? So yeah, I always enjoy a good fashion documentary for sure.
Okay, bold colors or neutral tones?
Lately,
Yeah.
I've been really more into neutral tones. I've been practicing how to wear more neutral colors like grays, blacks, whites. I usually don't. Like, I'm a bold color girl. Like, even with the blue, this is like still neutral, but I'm very much bold in how I usually dress. But lately, I think as of recent, in the past couple of months, I've been exploring how to wear more neutral tones and knowing just experimenting how to style them in a way that still fits my unique way of expression. But for now, I would say neutral because I'm in that season. Yeah.
Okay, so we've seen a lot about fashion weeks and people have a lot of things to say about influencers on fashion week and everybody has ideas, blah, 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 blah. But would you prefer being front row at fashion week, at a fashion week, or would you prefer having a backstage pass to see behind the scenes?
Backstage, definitely backstage, because, there's so much that goes on backstage that I would love to experience, especially if it's like, one of my favorites is London Fashion Week. I follow a lot of the Afro-diasporic designers there. So being able to like just be there or just like even like work with them or even just document their experience and be like, whoa, this is like what you go through to bring forth these beautiful pieces in front. I would love to know like those secrets, like those like intricacies of how they maneuver, like what they do, how they work, like where their mindset is in that zone. That's something I'm really more interested in, rather, even though I like the pieces, I'm more interested than actually being front row. I'm like, oh yeah, this is the after result. But seeing like that, the hands in the plow, like what they go through to bring it out. I really want to experience that, and I would rather want to see that instead. Yeah.
For me, I just want that stand-up picture of me in front row where my hair looks good and everything, and I look like, well, I'm important, yes. But it's like, oh, that, who's that? Like, she's somebody, and then you have to Google me, like that standard, like front row, like how Rihanna looks when she's like in the front row. That's what I want. But backstage, if I was there, like maybe to conduct interviews, but I just feel like the chaos of backstage, there's so much that happens and so much that goes on that it's a lot.
Yeah. I would also love to be like front stage, but I feel like maybe after a few years of having more experience backstage, I'm like, okay, I feel like I want to be in the limelight, because I'm very much like a behind the scenes type of person, so yeah, being front row would be really cool, but I feel like right now in my season, I would really like to be more backstage.
Okay. So, trend setting or trendsetters or classic style?
Trendsetters, of course.
Okay, what makes you say that?
I love the idea of having your own unique style. Even if it may be like similar to other people's, or like you have a reference from somebody else, maybe like on Pinterest or whatever, or on TikTok, whatever. But like, being able to see what other people are doing, but also recreate it in your own way, I feel like that's really cool. And it speaks a lot about your identity and like confidence and how you show up in this world. So I'm very much, I admire people who are trendsetters, because I know it takes a lot of effort to stand out in a way that, you're okay with the looks, what people are saying, but you're still confident, like, this is me, I'm going to show up as myself. So trendsetters for sure.
Interesting. Because I feel like I like classic. Like, I think a lot of those,
okay.
and I think a lot of those pieces end up coming back. And I think certain people that we put as trendsetters are classic with what they do. Like they may wear a similar like piece, like that is like known to them, and it becomes trendy. Yeah. But maybe they don't consider themselves as a trendsetter, but everybody has put the name trendsetter on themselves if they're like, because I feel like now, especially with social media, we're seeing like aesthetic this and aesthetic that, and it's like, but everybody's style is so different that you could be a classic trendsetter. Like
Scandinavians, like, I don't know if you follow Copenhagen Fashion Week, like they are the classics, like the trendsetters of like classic wear, because it's like simple, like neutral tones, but the way they layer it is so like unique and cool. So I think it's called like the Scandinavian style. Like I'm really into that lately. I feel like that's why I've been trying to wear more like neutral tones, right? But I like when you mention like the classic trendsetters, because they are out there for sure.
Most definitely. So we're gonna get into our proverb picks. Your favorite section.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So I think because a lot of like African cultures across the continent use proverbs to teach lessons, and usually there's a lion, there's a goat, something in there. So I went to find a Yoruba proverb, and it's here in Yoruba, but I'm going to read it in English. So
oh my goodness.
It says, "The needle has no mouth, yet it carries the thread through water." So what do you think that means to you? There's no right or wrong answer, but what do you take from that?
The needle has no mouth, but it carries the thread through the water. I feel like it's talking about how, we all have a place in society, but we need to like play our part in a way. Like when it says the needle has no mouth, but it still carries the thread through, is mean that, okay, even though it doesn't have a mouth, it has its purpose within the system of being a needle and a thread. It has its purpose, and knowing its purpose is to carry it through the water, right? Through whatever, I know fashion wise, it could be, making that nice garment, right? It still has its purpose. So that's what I think of first. It's like, like knowing your purpose, knowing your place, knowing that you are here for a reason, right? But also in a sense, it gives off this resilient nature as well. especially in the part when it says it has no mouth. I feel like it doesn't have a voice in a way, but behind the scenes, it's doing something, but people may not see it, but they're still resilient. 'Cause I feel like a lot of times, even like as just humans in general, we may not show everybody all the parts of ourselves and how we get to where we get to. We always show people the good parts, right? Because we can see like, oh yeah, it's going through the water. We show people the good parts, but we don't see behind the scenes what's really going on, right? So I feel like that's like that not having a mouthpiece comes in, I feel, until it now goes through the water, and then you finally see the beauty of it. Yeah.
Okay, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
See, it wasn't as hard. You got it. Okay, so let's start with your childhood.
Okay.
Little Nifemi. What was you doing? How was childhood like for you? I know that you said you grew up in Canada. Yes or no?
I was born in Nigeria.
Okay.
But then I moved to South Africa when I was 4.
Okay.
Yes. And then I moved here to Canada when I was 10.
Okay.
Yeah. So
You've been to many places. And they've
there's a lot
influenced you.
of dots.
But I remember you said one time you told me you lived in different parts of Alberta.
Yes. Before I was in Edmonton, I lived in St. Paul,
Okay.
which is not too far from Bonnyville, Codedale area. A very small town. Yeah.
So growing up in so many, like being born in Nigeria, living in South Africa, and then coming to Canada, like I feel like those experiences like nurtured your growth into who you are today. Can you talk a little bit, like what do you recall about growing up in Nigeria?
Not much.
Yeah.
Except for school. I remember a little bit about my schooling. Typical like wearing uniforms. I remember my neighborhood where I grew up, playing outside a lot. But also being very like really curious growing up as well, because I feel like as a child my parents had to monitor me a lot in a way, because I've always like trying to check this one place. So like I remember a story my mom told me. She was like, yeah, we go to church and we would have to like take you down from the altar because you'd want to stand at the altar. This one just playing around, so I was always busy moving around. So I feel like that plays a part in who I am today. I'm very much like a explorative person, a go-getter in a way, confident, so I feel like that stems from my childhood, very from much like young age growing up in Nigeria, and how I've traveled through as well. Yeah.
So from that night, from transitioning from Nigeria to South Africa, do you have any memories of like the South Africa?
Yeah, very much more of like living in South Africa. I have more memories there, still intact compared to Nigeria, because I was very, very young. I moved when I was 4, right? So living in South Africa, same thing. I would like be outside a lot, play a lot. I was part of cadet when I was in school, dancing, played a lot of outdoor sports, track and field, ping pong, really active as a child growing up. I always enjoyed the street markets, that was very fun. I enjoyed going to the mall. Like that was a fun thing for me, like with my family, with my cousins, with my friends, like mall trips. In Joburg, that was always fun. And then going to go eat at Spurs. That's one of the restaurants, having a good burger and chicken. So those are some really good memories of living in South Africa. Yeah.
So did you have any culture shock? So what age did you come to Canada then?
10.
10. Okay. So I feel like Nigeria and South Africa, being in those environments and then coming to Canada, do you like, I know you were young, but were there like any culture shocks that you had or experienced like during your time?
Yeah, I feel like everybody says it's like the snow for sure. Okay. Definitely the snow. I would say when it comes to like school wise, there was a huge culture shock there, because growing up in South Africa, I felt, just one with everybody, I didn't really have to question myself as much compared to when I moved here in Canada. And like the first time I moved to Canada, I was in Toronto, and I was very comfortable there because like a really big city, and there was a lot of Black people. So it was like, cool, you know, I can navigate this, you know, the snow, we can manage. And then boom, we moved to St. Paul. Like a couple months, I was like, what? See all the cows, just land, just bare land, you know? And that to me was like, what is going on here? And then going to school and not seeing many Black people at school, like, I think a lot of like Black people who moved to Canada at a young age experience like similar things, right? So I don't need to really go on tangent there, but yeah, I would say definitely in school was the culture shock there was just like really trying to find my place, like not knowing who I was, you know, at a very young age, moving here at 10 compared to when I was in South Africa, where I felt like, you know, just enjoyment. It was just fun. But here I just felt like a lot of things I had to think about to just exist. So yeah.
Okay, so when you think back about your childhood, what are some things that you did that maybe brought you like joy or made you happy that you no longer do?
I would say the ping pong.
Okay.
Yeah. I remember when I lived in South Africa, like we call it flat there, like here it's apartment. In the flat that I lived in was very much like closeness. So most of the people who lived in that flat, we all went to the same church, which was like, felt like a family. And there was an area within the flat, like upstairs, where there's like a playing area, and we can like set up like our ping pong. So like the neighbors would be like me playing and stuff like that. So I don't play ping pong anymore, you know? And I know now I found out recently that ping pong is actually quite an elite sport. So, you know, I missed that. I also missed playing tennis, because when I moved to Canada, I was playing tennis like competitively, actually, tennis and badminton. I was actually really like into it. I was doing that, but I don't play tennis as much. Maybe sometimes in the summer once in a while, but all of those like unique sports, like I don't do them as much. I feel like now I'm starting to get back into some of them. Yeah, so like cross country, I started doing that again a bit. So I want to get back into running. Yeah.
So one of your many one of your many passions is fashion, and you exude fashion in different ways. One being a fashion researcher. So can you let us know, like, how did you get into fashion research, and what does that look like for somebody who may not understand what fashion research is?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So little backstory of how I got into fashion research was that 2022, I was like going through a lot during that time, trying to figure out whether I wanted to continue my education or drop out. There was just a lot going on at that time, in that season of my life. And I decided, okay, I have one more semester. Let's just finish. Let's just do it. Right. And at the same time, I was also I was thinking about, okay, so once school is done, like, what am I going to be doing? You know, I've been in fashion. I've been doing it bits and bits here, styling, collaborating, all these kind of things. And I needed to figure out, okay, what is the direction of, you know, fashion for me? Because at first I wanted to be a fashion anthropologist. I wanted to do fashion psychology. So I had all these different ideas of what I wanted to do. But then, you know, I was spending a lot of time with the Lord, with the Holy Spirit, and I was able to grasp through that season that I need to really dig deeper into the realm of the fashion industry. And for me, I saw that as like, okay, getting into fashion research, right? So it was around October or November time, a friend of mine who lives in Calgary shared with me an opportunity to be part of this fashion research fellowship. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy, because I was thinking about doing something like this, but didn't know like how or where these opportunities are, right? So I applied for it. I had to write an essay, do all the whole application process, and had my interview, blah, 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 blah. Heard back from them a couple of weeks, got accepted into the research fellowship. I was like, okay, this is great. And also at the same time, while I was trying to navigate what I wanted to do in fashion, I also wanted to develop more depth into my work as a fashion stylist, because I felt like a lot of my work centered around, you know, my personal experiences, but also just like my view of beauty and style. And I really wanted to dig deeper into fashion from a culture perspective, from a political perspective, from an environmental perspective, but I didn't know how to like navigate that. And I was listening to a video interview by this one photographer. She's a Japanese photographer. Can't pronounce her name, so I'm not even gonna try. But she mentioned something in the interview that just struck a rod in me. She was like, you know, if you're a photographer, you can't just only be a photographer. You have to tap into film. You need to look into, you know, painting, and obviously you have to understand all these worlds so that your work could be grounded in, have more cultural depth in your work. And I was like, wait, that's literally what has been missing in my work. So getting into the fashion research program, I got accepted into the Council for International African Fashion Education, CF for short, and they're a research think tank based in between Ghana and the UK. And basically their work is centered around decentralizing fashion, but mainly also creating understanding of the African fashion ecosystem so that there can be more economic growth and sustainable development in that essence. So my work essentially revolves around, you know, developing case studies, articles around, let's say, oh, what is a bubu, right? So it's like, oh, what is Ankara? Like, what is the history of these things? So really understanding the history of African fashion and the diaspora. So that was my research focus around. And also it focused a lot into policy work as well. So it really looked at fashion beyond the design aspect, which I feel like a lot of people are more resonant of, right? So it looked at fashion from business perspective, from a partnership perspective, from bridging the talent gaps, like really creating a database where, you know, anybody who wants to tap into the African fashion ecosystem can be like, okay, they have the resources, they know where to go to, which is our platform. We have all those articles, all those research, the reports around it, right? And there's a lot of people in Africa even that are doing those type of work, but my organization is doing it from that point, that perspective. Yeah.
So speaking about fashion research and your love for fashion, where like when you were growing up, when you were young, like when did you start gaining that interest into fashion?
I feel like I've always been passionate about, you know, fashion from a young age. Like I remember, even though I would wear my school uniforms in South Africa, I would always try to figure out a way to make it look stylistic in some way or some form, right? And I remember my mom had shared with me last year, I was actually, I'm a type of person, I'm always digging deeper into like who I am from both like physical and spiritual perspective, right? And I remember I was doing a lot of digging deeper into like my identity, very much so last year because of a lot that has been going on in my life. And I had asked my mom like, oh, like, tell me about my birth story, you know, like what was that experience like, you know? And then I mentioned to me that, oh, when you were born, one of the nurses looked at you and said like, oh, this person is going to be into fashion.
Oh, wow.
Randomly.
Okay.
I was like, whoa, that's
They really professed it from the start.
From the start, it was like a prophecy, you know? So like, I've always known that I was like into fashion, even from a very young age. Even though I didn't like, I feel like throughout my years, I've been navigating, like even as a stylist, I feel like being a stylist was the catalyst to bring me to where I am right now. Like for the longest time, I thought like being a stylist was the only thing for me that I wanted to do. But then I realized like, oh, there's a greater, like, I'm not saying that being a stylist is not a great field, but for me, there's something even much greater that I need to pursue within the fashion industry. And styling was the way to get me to that point, and I'm still in that journey, right? So yeah, from a young age, I've always been big into just looking different, styling myself. I remember in high school was, I think, the turning point for me when I realized like, oh, I don't want to be wearing leggings and Uggs and sweaters every day to school, you know? And the high school that I went to, like that was basically the style, right? And I remember in my grade 11 year, I don't know what happened. There's something just clicked and I would just be experimenting with my clothing, even though like I may have felt uncomfortable dressing that way to school, but I still did it, you know? And that to me was just like helping me navigate like my identity. I don't know. There's a book called The Theory of Fashion. And it looks about, you know, all the psychological like terms that we learn, like social psychology, whatever that we learn in school, but it positions it in the point of view of fashion, like, you know, what are you communicating when you dress, you know, why we dress the way we dress, you know, the understanding of what are we representing. So for me, in grade 11, grade 12, it was really understanding my identity, trying to voice my identity through the way I dressed.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't know what it was yet, I was still just like experimenting, right? And then grade 12, my graduation year, I started a blog.
Okay.
And that's how I started navigating more into the fashion world and etc. So it has always been like different things happening in my life that made me realize, like, oh, okay, like I can do this. Let's explore it. And then it expand into something else. And here I am.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you have the podcast Sunday Refocus.
Mm-hmm.
Can you let us know a little bit more about the podcast?
Yeah.
Kind of your journey to creating that.
Yeah.
And how has it been so far?
Yeah. So Sunday Refocus was something that I've been planning since 2023, but I didn't really know exactly how to do it. And also because there's a lot of things going on. But then last year I wanted to do this 2022, sorry. And then 2023, it was just like my focus to just graduate from university. So I had spoken to one of my favorite fashion researchers and curators based in South Africa, Dr. Erica de Graaf. I had spoken with her, it was before my grad trip. So my grad trip, I went to Copenhagen, Denmark, to attend the Global Fashion Summit. And I had talked to her. I was like, oh, like I want to start my podcast. Like it would be great for you. I would love for you to be my first guest. And the reason why I had reached out to her is because I wanted to really, right after university, I was meeting with like different people within the industry and just like having one-on-ones with them and just kind of like understand like what are they doing, like, you know, give me pointers of how to navigate the industry, because, you know, now that I'm done school, being in Edmonton, like that was something that was difficult for me because I'm not in an environment where it's like so like fashion is like the main thing. So, excuse me, I had to basically reach out to different people within my ecosystem on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and just like have conversations with them. And I was like, wait, I feel like this is the time to really, you know, do it, because I was meeting with different people like every single day after graduating, and it was just like, and I would keep a log of like all the information I was gathering from them about the industry, what they're doing, whether it's like PR or marketing, right? So coming back from the Global Fashion Summit, which was an amazing experience, I got to meet so many people from the industry. I got to experience what it's like being in the production team at such a large scale event, right? Coming back, I was like, yeah, I think it's time to really start this podcast, right? So September, I had my first episode with Dr. Erica, and she's like I said, she's a curator, fashion curator and researcher based in South Africa, and her work is around decolonization of fashion. So we talked about like, you know, what is fashion research, what is fashion curation from a decolonial lens, right? So my podcast, Sunday Refocus, is basically centered around it's very much educational, and it's centered around empowering emerging creatives within the fashion industry. Something that I realized within that is that a lot of creatives who are passionate about fashion, some of them have this perspective that they can only do one thing. Maybe it's like, okay, they only need to be in design. They can only make it as a designer. Or maybe only make it as a photographer. I feel like a lot of people know photography, fashion design, styling. What else can I say about? Those are the main things that a lot of people know about, whether you're in fashion or you're starting out in fashion. And I wanted to break that barrier and break that misconception that there's only few options within the fashion industry to thrive. So my fashion podcast is centered around exposing all the different subsectors of the fashion industry. So I remember I would spotlight somebody who works as a fashion lawyer. She's working in fashion law and policy, right? Somebody who does image retouching. What is image retouching? How is that a backbone, a hidden backbone of a lot of the images we see on social media and magazines, right? Looking at, running a brand, like what does it take to start your own fashion brand and making it go global, right? So it's like all these different subsectors, PR, marketing, like what is that? Like, how do you even make it in the industry? What is a mental capacity? What do you need to do? How do you need to, what mindset basically do you need to have to make it into these different subsectors? So a lot of times in the fashion industry, it's so it's very exclusive, you know. So it's like if you know type of energy, and it's like it's an industry that you kind of, somebody has to open the door for you to kind of make your way in the industry. And for me, it was more so like, okay, not only can we learn about the diverse in the subsectors within the fashion industry, but also be exposed to informal knowledge that you won't get in classrooms, you won't see on social media, you won't read it in an article, because you need to be in that position to know what is going on. So a lot of the people I talked to, it was like, oh wow, I didn't know this is what you go through on a day-to-day. Like, how are you, like, what? So for me, I was learning a lot at the same time in engaging with all these diverse people. And at first I didn't realize I was doing this, but I was picking people that were of, minority groups, so Black, Asian, brown. So it's just like, that's who I feel like is also a huge part of the podcast, is like highlighting underrepresented voices as well within the podcast. So that's basically how it started. Now I just wrapped up season 1, so I'm in the process of developing season 2. And for season 2, I want to focus it more on the Canadian perspective, because season 1 was very much like a global perspective. I was interviewing people from Africa, interviewing people from Europe, and then the US. So now I really want to hone in on understanding how, Canada is an emerging fashion market, like, how it started, where is it going, where are we right now? So I feel like that's the angle for season 2. Yeah.
So you're the founder, co-CEO of, is it Orale?
Yeah. So I'm the CEO. I have a CTO. So so that has been established.
So you're the CEO. Yeah. Okay. So you're the founder and CEO of Orale. And this is like a fashion media platform for Black designers and artisans in Canada. So how do you feel like this platform is going to change the fashion landscape in Canada? Because I think when it comes to fashion in Canada, there are certain cities that may have more, maybe more popular with their fashion weeks and with their designs and their showrooms. How do you see your platform kind of breaking those barriers, especially for Black designers and artists?
Thank you for the question. I can't highlight so much about it yet because of legal reasons.
Yes, of course.
But what I can say about the platform and the purpose of it essentially is to, break down barriers. One, I feel like one thing for me that I realized as a fashion stylist was that in going to a lot of retailers, showrooms, and etc., trying to find Black designers, trying to find Black artisans here in Canada is like a needle in a haystack. So for me, it's really, creating more visibility around the designers and artisans that we have here. Creating a platform where you can experience them in a more engaging and immersive way. I would say those are the main thing for Orale right now. It's like, okay, we want to, our big thing is visibility, community, like having that community where it's like not only the designers have an opportunity to expand their offerings or to loyal customers, but also for customers who want to engage with Black designers and artisans to have an opportunity to experience them in a completely different way, and that's what we're working on. So that's what I can share for now. But yeah.
So looking into the Edmonton fashion scene, maybe we can even span it into Alberta per se. What opportunities do you think would help to shape the fashion scene here in the city? Because I feel like the challenges people might already know. So I want to focus on like what opportunities should be out there or are going to be created maybe in the future, maybe by you or from some other designers. Like what would help the fashion landscape in Edmonton? Yeah.
There's a lot that's already going on. Like I don't want to undermine the work that has already been done. I really do give props to a lot of the collectives that are already out there here in Edmonton, in Alberta in general, like in Calgary. There's a few people that I follow their work and see that they're creating space for designers, for artisans to thrive. And that's a beautiful thing because like we do need it. We do need that. I would say moving forward and looking in a more expansive and growth perspective, I would say creating space where designers and artisans in Edmonton can learn more about the business side of their work, right? Because we are doing a lot of showcase. I feel that's where we are right now. So, okay, let's really just show people that we're here. And that's great. And because we need that right now. It's been a long time coming where we don't see enough of, Black, Asian, Indigenous like designers, right? And we have to have that here where we're able to showcase that, because we look at Toronto. They're doing a lot. So it's like, let's check them out, right? But it's not like we have to copy them. We need to figure out like what works here for the types of designers we have here. What are their aspirations? Where do they see themselves going? Do they see themselves staying local? Do they see themselves expanding internationally? Like what is that? Like how do we cater to these different segments of designers, right? So for me, I would say it's time for us to create like incubators. For designers and for artisans, where they can really hone in on improving their design craft, like sewing, for example. Like how can we improve the quality of your work, and then like now how can we improve the business of what you do? Because I feel like a lot, like what I've realized in speaking with designers is that they have all the ideas in the world. They have all the ideas in the world, but it's like, okay, how can we ground it in reality? Yeah. And that's where research comes in too, but I want to go so deep into that. But like, as much as we're collaborating in Showcase, we need to also collaborate with people who have the business side of things to help your business grow and expand. And I feel like that's what we need here in Edmonton, in Alberta, is those spaces for designers to grow their business. And they are incubators, even though they may not be fashion focused. I feel like a lot of designers, so not even, maybe some of them feel like, okay, if it has nothing to do with fashion, maybe it's not gonna support me. I'm telling y'all, just because it doesn't have fashion in the name doesn't mean it should hinder you from like reaching out to the business incubators that we already have in Edmonton. There's a lot of them, right? So it's like maybe now creating one that's actually catered to designers and artisans would be something that should be the next step into growing Edmonton's design community and creative community on a larger scale. Yeah.
So I feel like not recently, but there's been more talk, especially on social media, about continental Africans and African diasporans, specifically when diasporans go back into the continent, and whether it's services, craftsmanship, because there is a gap between the money that is like the living wage, the cost of living in both places, and also how much people earn, how much people spend. So going into that, like, especially with Dirty December and how a lot of girls are going into anybody's are going to these countries and they're paying for services, and they're so shocked when they're like, oh, well, I just paid $30 for braids and I just paid $40. But how can we be able to bridge that gap? Because I feel like it's a two-way issue where the locals in the country are paying a certain price, and that is what they're used to paying, and that's what they can also afford. But on the flip side, when diasporans do come, and let's say they pay not close to what they pay here, but similar, and then also leave a huge tip. Because now I see in the braid, especially with braiding hair, you see a lot of certain braiding shops may only cater to diasporans now. Because they know that that's where they're gonna get the money. But then it's like, if another shop is more local and they're seeing this shop caters to diasporans and they're making this amount of money more than them, but we need somebody to cater to the local. So I don't know. I don't think there's really an answer for that. But if you can provide maybe some insight that you might have or know more about that.
Yeah.
Because it's a heavy one. It's a heavy question.
It's a heavy question. And it's something that I would say I'm still exploring and doing research in it. I did have a conversation about it on my story for like weekly Q&As with Nif, where I had asked people basically like that question, like, you know, how can we bridge that like talent gap or appreciation of like craftsmanship in Africa, right? Even though I'm not in Africa, I feel like, you know, it's something that we see on social media from outside, but I feel like if you're really inside, like you would know, like, okay, this is what's really going on, right? I would say, you know, from a diasporic perspective, like what we can do is hone in on appreciating the craft more, right? I feel like a lot of times we, and something that I mentioned on my stories, like we focus a lot on, like you said, like, oh, like this is so cheap, this is so cheap, it's so cheap, right? Because then, you know, not even trying to like compare like the West and, you know, Africa. I feel like we do that a lot, right? But like at the end of the day, we have to see that, you know, craftsmanship here in the West is something that is like appreciated differently, you know, and it's like lots of money that has been put into it, right? And then we look at craftsmanship in Africa, you know, wherever it may be per se, but where there's appreciation there for sure, right? But I feel like there also needs to be the increase of setting up value chains around those craftsmanship, right? So it starts within. So for example, like you said, you know, there's people who are now catering specifically to diasporans because they've understood, like, oh wow, like we don't have to be making, you know, we can make more money at the end of the day, right? So it depends on when somebody sees the light for themselves and be like, okay, I'm gonna start running with actually placing more value around my work.
But I think,
you know,
especially with like, if they place more value on the work, that's great. And we obviously want people who are working in those shops for a certain amount of hours to make the money that they need to survive. But the issue becomes when the ecosystem no longer can provide for them. Because, oh, I go to this shop and I pay this much. But now they're like, oh, we pay this is in USD, this is in pounds. And then it's like, well, last month I was here and this is how much I paid. The
thing is that it's the same thing everywhere. It's the same thing because you look here in even in the fashion industry here, for example, like a photographer can come to me and be like, hey, Nifemi, I want to work with you. Like, what's your rate? And I can be like, okay, here's my rate. And then they'd be like, oh, your rate is so expensive. Like somebody is like, let's say I put my rate as like 1,000, right? And then they'd be like, oh, 1,000. That's a lot. Somebody who did it with me last time for like half that price, 500, right? So it's like, and then they go to that person. So at the end of the day, like the value that you set is the value that you set. Because there'll be people who they will look at the value, but oh wow, this person is charging a lot. But I can go to somebody who can charge cheaper, right? And they go to that person. So for you, it's like the people who are willing to pay your worth will come to you. We see that even here in Canada, the same thing, right? So that's why, like from the get-go, you have to set a certain standard for yourself and be known for that certain standard. Because if you set it less, they'll be like, okay, yeah, this is fine. I remember I was listening to a podcast. There was I forgot what the person did. For example, what the person did exactly, but basically they were working with this production company. and this was their first time doing something like this, right? They were like, oh yeah, like we can take this pay. So second season come around, they were like, okay, we want to charge more.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh no, like, oh, how dare you ask for more? Like you were able to accept this much last season. Like what? So they didn't go with her, but then they hired somebody else. And the person that they hired, they even paid more to that person. So you can see, like, because from the get-go, she had set that value for herself, they expected the same from her. So somebody else that they hired, they were willing to pay more to that person.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting
It's very
conversation.
controversial,
because
you
there's
know?
so many takes you can think. And for me, like, because I lived in Ghana for a certain amount of time, like 2020, what, 2?
Yeah.
Was it 2022. And like understanding the gap between what locals make.
Yes.
Understanding like the rich versus the poor.
Yeah.
Like there's so many different aspects and different avenues. And as much as it's great that diasporans are going back, we do know that like it's increasing the cost of living.
Yeah.
Because if you're coming with USDs, you're coming with pounds, it's obviously going to increase the cost of living in the country. But it's like, especially with payments per se from even international companies.
Yeah.
Having friends who work in the creative ecosystem, I've seen, and they've told me that they can work with a certain big company, but they know that the people who are working in their maybe offices in the States or in Europe are making 10 times more because they're looking at the cost of living and things like that. But then also there was a big platform that like laid off their employees in a certain country in Africa. And when they did this, all the other people in other countries were able to receive their severance package. But this company was just like, okay, bye, gone. And then it's like, well, we've been working remotely for a year. Our office is here. Now we have no job and you're not going to give us severance. And there's something that they had to fight for before they get it. So it's like, and I think there's so many different aspects because I feel like there's a lack of respect for people on the continent and what they do, because they're like, okay, you learn this much, so this is your cost of living in your country, which I understand like those spaces and things, but then it's at the same time, like the care and what you would put into the people who are working for your company in the continent is different from like outside. And
at the end of the day, you also have to go back to the state of the economy itself, right? So it's like, you know, there needs to be change within the government at the end of the day,
There's
right?
A lot of things,
And I remember I was listening to a BOF, Business of Fashion podcast, one of their event called Voices, where they bring all these different stakeholders within the fashion ecosystem from all over the world. And they had the conversation about, you know, African fashion, like the future of like where it's going, right? This was a 2019 episode feature. It had Madame Omayemi Akilere, who is the founder of Lagos Fashion Week. It had a different person, I forget her name, but she has a fashion line, and all the products is made in Ethiopia. And also had somebody who's from China, I forget his name, but his organization was called Made in Africa. And it was talking about, you know, labor and manufacturing and how we need to improve the infrastructure, yada, yada, yada. And, you know, although Omoyemi and so many people like her and who are grassroots and et cetera, and are working in the ecosystem, working with the government, working with the talent, with the creatives and et cetera, right? There's so much they can do. There's limited capacity still, right? Because there's like obviously lack of funding, like, you know, how can we pay people enough? And then you see the Asians, they come in, they bring the manufacturers. The government allows them to create those manufacturing. It's a deep topic, right? So it's something that for me, myself, I'm still grappling. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to understand it from a manufacturing, from a labor, bridging the talent gap perspective, right? So when you ask me about like, oh, now diasporans coming in, like many of them don't have the awareness of that, of like what's really going on. You know, they don't really have the awareness.
I think if they live there because there's a lot of diasporans that have gone with USDs and pounds. But when the money finishes, they're like, oh, so this is what it's like being here.
I think, and for me, I feel like I still need to experience that. I still definitely have to like experience going back. I'm like, a lot of my research has been grounded in, and I think I'm so thankful that I've had the opportunity to like interview so many people. So it's not so much based on like what I'm reading, but a lot of it has been like, you know, research from the plethora of databases that I have, but also like getting the opportunity to even interviews that I don't even have on my podcast, right? So actually one-on-one meeting with brands, one-on-one meeting with people who are literally multi-million dollar creatives within the ecosystem, and what they're doing in the ecosystem, and learning and hearing like, oh, this is what's going on here. If you're coming to Nigeria, this is what you need to know. You can't just come and say you want to do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
You know, you have to start speaking with these people, right? So it's like that gap needs to be bridged, you know?
I think it ties back into this. I'm
Yeah.
like, why is this question tied? But it ties back into this about certain fashion designers, fashion houses, finding things from outside of the continent, finding things within the continent, paying for it to be, you know, they're paying the local fee.
Yeah.
And then they're bringing it back to the outside of the continent. They're putting on fashion shows, but they're using literally prints or designs or jewelry or whatever in their fashion pieces that are from the continent without giving any credits or even stealing certain fashion, like certain African designers. Like how do we create a system that we are afforded? I think it goes back to the respect.
Yeah.
Like if people respect African people and what we do, then they know that, oh, if we come in, we know we have to pay this cost. We can't like rip them off. We have to give credit. Like I think because a lot of those things are not in place, it gives them the runaround to do anything. But how do you look into that?
From my perspective, okay, first thing I would say, it starts with respect within the region.
Yeah.
Because from how I've been seeing is that a lot, even designers within, they get their own, a lot of them get their fabrics from outside.
That's true.
A lot of them, because trying to get fabric from within is so difficult.
And it's expensive.
It is so it's so expensive. So a lot of them, they get it from India, from Vietnamese, from, you know, they get it from outside in general, right? So it's like, you know, if there are many, like a lot of really great manufacturing hubs in Senegal, in Kenya, in Ghana. There's some really good hubs. I know a designer based in Montreal, Batik Boutique. She's Ghanaian Canadian, right? So she goes to Ghana and she has a team that she works with, and they make everything handmade, local, like. They make the batik product, and it's such a beautiful process. She documents it on her page, right? So I remember I was speaking with a lady who has a fashion accelerator in Nigeria, and she works with manufacturing hubs, right? And she said, what we need to do is we need to instill the concept of, you know, made in Africa. You know, that needs to start becoming more of a thing, you know. I feel like it's gradually is becoming a thing. But to answer your question, when it comes to, you know, international people coming to Africa, or maybe it's Senegal, or maybe it's Nigeria to work with artisans, right? I would say it's great that they're doing that because it's more sustainable. It's actually more sustainable to work with artisans in the continent as a designer, because you're actually increasing your you're adding to your sustainable development goals, right? So there's a lot there that you're doing. So for example, if you're working with people in Ghana, you're actually helping them reduce their textile waste, because a lot of textile waste that these organizations like the OR Foundation, they go to the beaches and get all these different waste, and now recycle them and all these different things and bring them back to life. Like that's like someone's day-to-day job, you know what I mean? So when it comes to the credit part of thing, that's like inwardly knowing that you need to acknowledge the artisans. Because a lot of people, I remember I was having this conversation with a good friend of mine and a colleague, she's based in Montreal. And her work, she has an organization called FAD, which is Fashion, Arts and Development. And her work is to help artisans collaborate with artisans in West Africa. And basically, you know, work on different design products and bring them to the West or spread them around regionally, right? And for her, it's basically really showing people like the experiences of an artist and like what do they go through on a day-to-day basis? How do they create what they create? A lot of these international designers, they don't do that, or maybe they don't feel like they have the time to do that. You know what I mean? So it comes with like the acknowledgement of like, okay, like you said, the respect part, like we need to acknowledge the artisans, we need to give them autonomy as part of our supply chain, right? So it's definitely that recognition there, but also within the continent actually recognizing ourselves. That needs to be rooted first. Is that okay? If we can recognize ourselves, we can then demand recognition, right? So yeah, that's how I view it.
This has been a deep conversation.
Yeah,
This conversation can be like 5 hours because there's so many different aspects.
yeah. There's
and
so
things,
many different
and it's like
aspects.
as much as we want to do, there's not really like the answer, but we're gonna like scale it back to just a little fun, a little chill question. So
yeah, for sure.
we're gonna get into like exploring your 5 senses. So if you were in your dream world, or you created your own dream world, or you were put in your favorite place in the world, based on your 5 senses, describe what you would see.
What would I see? In my dream world, I would really love to see myself and my community, many people knowing who they are, living out their purpose. That's what I see, like a community of people who are just driven by what they do and making a difference.
What would you hear?
I would hear. I feel like I visually see myself like in this like city, like there's like many people just on the go.
Yeah.
You know, I would hear like, you know, the train coming by, you know, people talking.
So there'd be lots of like energy,
just like a place full of just like life and just motion, a lot of motion. Yeah.
What would you smell?
I think I'll smell coffee.
Okay.
I smell coffee.
Give me Italy. Is not where Italy? What country is like known for their coffee?
I don't know. Ethiopia is known for coffee.
True.
Yeah, I definitely smell coffee. Spices, like different spices. Like it's very like heat, you know.
How would you
Feel?
Yeah.
I would feel like I'm in Dominion. Like I would feel very much like in where I need to be at that point in time. Like I'm a very big believer of times and seasons. I feel like I would understand what time it is in my life, what season it is in my life, but also in my surrounding, and knowing like, okay, because of the current times and season, this is what needs to be done at this time of season. So I feel like I'll be very much in dominion of my life and dominion of where I need to be at that time.
What would you taste?
What did I taste? This is random. I would taste puff puff.
Okay. Which is like, let's say like a donut that is in several West African countries. East Africans have their own version as well.
Yeah,
so
just be having a nice puff puff and maybe mango juice.
Yeah. I feel that. So so you're saying like tropical but metropolitan city.
Yes.
So
like,
a mixture.
Still bringing in like that, what would you say, like that breeze of like life into the metropolitan like energy that's around. It's not so much just like that go energy, but you can just like catch a breath and just be like, you know, we're chilling, like we're doing what we need to do, but we're content. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you've seen this question on TikTok, but or like any other social medias.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen this question on social media, but it says, if you suddenly were given like money or wealth, what would be the signs or changes that would show others or even yourself that, okay, I'm wealthy, I've made it? Like what would that look like for you?
What would that look like for me? So repeat the question again.
So if you were given money,
yeah,
what would be the signs or changes that, oh, you have money?
That I
So
have
for some
money?
people, it's like they're taking flights, they're traveling. Some
I feel
people,
like you would see me less.
That's exactly what somebody else said.
I feel like you would definitely see me less because, you know, and that's something I'm working on. Like I'm a type of person that I love to it's always been in me. I love to help people. I love to support. I love being a resource to other people, right? And I feel like now, so in my life, I'm learning how to manage that. I can't always extend myself because there's things I need to do, you know? So I would say that at that point in my time, I feel like people would see less of me because at the end of the day, I still have to manage that wealth.
Yeah, of course.
I have to manage that wealth. And that's one sign I would say people would, myself, I would recognize, but also other people would recognize is like how less of me they see. But also, for me, I would say that being able to live out my values in a prolific way, right? I am living up my values for sure right now, but you know, I feel like there's certain like financial things that sometimes hinder us from being able to be where we want to be or do what we want to do. Maybe it's like self-care, certain things with self-care, for example. So it's like I feel like I would have more opportunities to do that. It may not be that, oh, I have more time to do it, but it's like, okay, I can do it more. Yeah, the opportunity to do that more.
So we've come to the point where you get to ask me a question. Yeah. Question that I don't know, but this is random.
Oh, yeah.
So ask me a question and I will answer.
Yeah. Okay. A question I want to ask you.
Why are you smiling at me like that?
Because I want to make sure I'm asking you something that hopefully nobody else have asked you yet. You know. So what would you say is a fear that you're actively overcoming or wanting to overcome?
Ooh, that's a deep one. We're getting deep. Wow. A fear. Oh, this is a good one. A fear constantly. I feel like I have a lot of fears. I think I had a fear of walking with lions, but I did that. So, I mean, I can overcome my fears. I know that.
Yes.
I think the fear I have is just like putting my trust in other people because I feel like in the back of my mind, they're going to fail me. So I feel like I always have to put backup plans in a way to be like, okay, I can do it myself, blah, 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 because this person might disappoint. Like, I can't fully just, okay, I trust you.
Yeah.
There's always a worry. There's always like, I have to have like a plan B and C.
Yeah.
And then when the person or whatever happens doesn't follow through, then I'm like, this is why I have this and this and this and that to help to cover. So that I would say that's a fear I'm always constantly working through.
Can I ask another question?
One more.
Okay, one more question. Okay. Just pigging back on that. When it comes to like relationship with people, what would you say you look for in a good friend?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Because I've been like the whole friendship thing I've been looking for and I've been trying to navigate and understand what that looks like. What do I look for in a friend? I think them being able to know who they are as an individual and then when we do become friends, able to merge that and support that because everybody's different. So I don't expect the friend or person I meet to do the same thing.
Yeah.
I like when I can learn from them, when we can go through things together and they can gain insight from me and I can gain insight for them. So I think like that ability to have conversations that are not just like, okay, like it's great to have like a day-to-day, but if like your friend is working on something or they're working on a project, and even if it's like it's not even my field or anything, I love the fact that I get to learn from them and they're being open about it. So definitely like them being their own person and they know who they are. And then when I come in knowing who I am, I think it kind of marries together and works in that way. Yeah.
I love that.
I love that too.
Thank you.
So we're at the end of our show. Can you let the people know where they can find you on any
Yes.
platforms or anything as such?
Yes, so I'm quite active on Instagram. My Instagram @ is my full government name. It's OLUWANIFEMI with 4 eyes at the end. So Nifemi with 4 eyes. And then I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So you can just search up my name, Nifemi Ashani. I'm pretty active on there. And then I have a website, styledbynif.ca. So you all can reach me out there. And my email, if you want to work with me, collaborate, partnership, you want to pitch something my way, my email is styledbynif@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming today
Thank
and
you for
sharing your
having me.
insight. I've learned so much.
Yeah, I learned so much from you too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this has been another amazing episode of Chop It Up with your girl Lebana. Catch up with us next week when we talk and speak to another person who inspires us, and we hope the show inspires you as well. Have a great day, morning, night, wherever you are, and we will see you again. Bye. It's over. Okay.